Hello, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to look at the next big thing from Funcom, which is Dune Awakening. And this is apparently going to be a huge open world survival game, an MMO, a massive multiplayer online game, but with a survival element, which I understand is very rare, and in fact hasn't been done before. So how they pull that off, I have no idea, but it does sound very exciting. Now the first thing to mention is that Funcom actually have two Dune projects on the go at the moment. There's Dune Awakening, which is still in production and has no release date as such. And then there's Dune Spice Wars. And Dune Spice Wars was launched earlier this year in April. But Funcom didn't develop the game apparently. That was developed by a French video game company called Shiro Games. So it is a little bit weird that we've got two Dune projects going on at the same time essentially. Apparently development on Dune Awakening started in 2019. And it might be that, unbeknown to them, Shiro Games had been developing Dune Spice Wars, and when the opportunity came along, Funcom offered to be the publisher. Perhaps there's some background synergies going on there. But Dune Spice Wars is just a PC game, so I'm not in a position to play it, and it's described as a 4X real-time strategy game. And a 4X game is just one where you have the 4 X's, which are to explore, to expand, to exploit and exterminate. And although Dune Spice Wars sounds quite interesting, having a look at the gameplay, it seems to be more like a board game that's been turned into a video project. And like I said, it's a PC game, so it's of no interest to me whatsoever, unfortunately. However, Dune Awakening will be released on all major platforms. It will be a PS5 game rather than PS4, and that's what we're going to take a look at today. So we're going to look at the trailer, and then look at some of the production art, and see what we can extract from that. So let's look at the trailer first, then we can have a bit of a chat about it afterwards.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I.
Well, there we are, very exciting. I love this typeface, by the way. It's absolutely fantastic. Anyway, let's rewind and have another look. So here we are on Arrakis, looking at the back of someone's head. I think this is meant to be Paul Atreides, and there's some dragonfly ornithopters in the background. And stylistically, this game seems to borrow very heavily from Dune 2021, the Denis Villeneuve film. There's a spice harvester down in the bottom of a pit for some reason, and very rapidly getting snaffled by a sandworm, which is something we saw in both the 2021 movie and the 1984 version. And this is quite interesting because this guy, who is meant to be Paul Atreides, looks very much like a young Jürgen Prochnow, who played Duke Leto Atreides in the 1984 movie. So although a lot of the design beats for Dune Awakening appear to have been taken from the most recent Dune movie, I think they based the character design of Paul on a young Jürgen Prochnow. You know, what Jürgen's son would have looked like. Anyway, that's my theory. Now, as I said, Dune Awakening was first announced in 2019, and at the time, Funcom said it was going to be a much more ambitious version of Conan Exiles, which would be quite an undertaking for an MMO where you've got potentially thousands of players, as opposed to Conan Exiles as it is now, where you've got a maximum of 40 players on a server. So how they're going to manage that is anyone's guess. But we are apparently at the stage where players can sign up for the beta, And if you do that, there's some quite interesting artwork to look at. So let's dip into that now. So here's our first 3 graphics, and it's saying discovered because I was looking at them again earlier. But if we click on the first picture, we get to this image, and it says, as a lone ornithopter pilot boards their craft, the twin moons of Arrakis offer a deceptively calm backdrop to the hazards of tracking spice blows across the wastes of the desert. Quite an attractive scene, and you can just see in the background one of the dragonfly ornithopters, which, like I said, was borrowed from the June 2021 movie, which might in turn have been borrowed from Lex, which was the science fiction show I used to quite enjoy. But this picture and other information we're given does suggest very heavily that a large part of the game is, as you might imagine, tracking down spice, and huge quantities of it. So let's go to the next image. So the caption for this one is, for those who seek the spice outside the shield wall, only rare islands of jagged rocks and craggy plateaus offer safety from the open desert and the ever-present danger of sandworms. Again, quite a dramatic vista here. And this is very much the Dune we know and love, which is mostly endless desert, with these rare islands of rock scattered about. Let's go to the next image. It's our first interior, and it says, smoking a spice cigarette, and a reverent Harkonnen shows her disdain for the Atreides by pouring precious water out, while an assassin surreptitiously grasps his dagger, readying himself for violence. And you can just see the assassin on the right there with a knife behind his back. But this is quite interesting in that it does show the Atreides and the Harkonnen sort of mixing together, which is very different from either of the films, or the books for that matter. In the traditional story, the Harkonnen leave Arrakis completely, and then the Atreides go down to replace them. There's no intermingling at all. But in this game it does appear that you've got various factions, all in the same place at the same time, all vying for power and influence. So this sounds very similar to the situation in Dune Spice Wars, where you've got a number of factions all vying against each other. You've got the House Atreides, House Harkonnen, House Carino, which is the royal household, then you've got the smugglers, and you've got the Fremen, the free men of the desert. And you essentially sign up as one of those factions to play the game. Here's our next 4 images, and I think there's 11 of these in total. Let's look at the first. Out in the deep desert beyond the shield wall, a heavily laden transport ornithopter narrowly escapes being engulfed by a massive spice blow spewing huge quantities of melange. Melange is just another name for the spice. And from what I've read, I get the impression that a lot of your time playing this game will be spent in chasing after these random spice blows. So one will go off in the desert, and then everyone in the vicinity will get there as soon as possible and try and gather it up before anyone else arrives. And if you come across someone harvesting spice, then you've got the option of attacking them and trying to steal it from them. Let's go to the next one. Centred around its spice finery and humming with activity day and night, the grimy frontier town of Windsack is a nexus for Atreides, Harkonnen and smugglers to buy, sell and swindle every kind of product or service on Arrakis. So again, another indication that you can have all the factions mixed together and interacting. I don't think Windsack is a particularly lovely name for a town. I'm rather surprised they chose that, but there you go. Again, some more ornithopters flitting around in the sky. But let's move on. Protecting its people and stores of spice, at the vanguard of Arrakine's defences are powerful las cannons mounted on towering plascrete bulwarks capable of slicing an attack ship in half. And Arrakeen is the name of I think the capital city of Arrakis. So this is one of the city defences, and I think the implication is that you as a player would be able to take one of these over potentially. Let's move on. It was only in the early dawn, before the sun had risen to full strength and begun to steal moisture from the air, that an Atreides palace guard was able to gaze out of the blast windows of the palace and contemplate the ruthless beauty of Arrakis. And again, this looks very much like the 2021 version of Dune. So quite dramatic and impressive. And it does underline that the Atreides are the masters of Arrakis, at this point in time at least. Let's go on. Now this one is very interesting. Built by Imperial scientists thousands of years before the discovery of spice, now abandoned botanical testing stations play host to unorthodox experiments run wild, ranging from genetic manipulation to efforts to transform Arrakis. Now, one of the criticisms I've heard of the concept for a Dune game is that the whole biome is essentially going to be desert and consequently could be a little bit dull. But by adding in these botanical testing stations, you've got the opportunity to liven things up a bit. So I don't know how big these testing stations are going to be, but I imagine some of them could be quite large. And I'm guessing that most of them contain sort of valuable resources. So you as a player will be going out to the desert looking for things like this that you can then exploit for your own benefit, and again risk being attacked by other players who want to steal these things from you. I can imagine some of them being fairly impressive dungeons, to be honest with you. Next picture. Though downed ornithopters are not uncommon in the deep desert, in order to strip them for usable parts before others get there or they are buried beneath the shifting sands, scavengers require speed and a fair amount of luck. So again, it looks like this is something else that players are going to be sent out to look for, these valuable old wrecks to be taken apart for scrap. And the comment about shifting sands does suggest that the surface of the planet is in constant flux. You've got these huge storms blowing stuff around and uncovering and or concealing locations and resources over time. So again, another way of livening up the gameplay. Keep everyone on their toes. Next picture. Seeking brief refuge in the shadow of an immense craggy overhang of volcanic rock, a lone spice prospector takes notice of incoming transport ships only just visible through the late afternoon sun and dense clouds of dust. So not too much to be inferred from this picture, I don't think, but I'm quite impressed with the scenery. In Conan Exiles, I think the desert is my favourite area. Next picture, please. And this is our last image, and this is another structure. It says, on a rocky promontory just outside the shield wall and standing over 100 metres tall, 2 lasgun turrets, their cannons trained on the storm-threatening sky, are poised to fire on any incoming threats to the city of Arrakis. So this is another version of those las towers we saw before. And again, I think the implication is that you or your clan or whatever could take over these turrets and utilise them in some way. But I think that is the last of the images. We do have some more information though. Here we go, a Dune Open World Survival MMO. Dune Awakening combines the grittiness and creativity of survival games with the social interactivity of large-scale, persistent multiplayer games to create a unique and ambitious open world survival MMO. Rise from survival to dominance in a vast and seamless Arrakis shared by thousands of players. And I don't typically think of Funcom as an MMO developer, but they do have an awful lot of experience in MMO games, though they're nearly all on PC, which is why I've really not come across them. So for example, in 2001 they published and developed Anarchy Online, which is an MMORPG. There was Age of Conan Unchained, Age of Conan Rise of the Godslayer, The Secret World, Pets vs Monsters, Lego Minifigures Online, and last but not least League World Legends. So they do have quite an extensive pedigree in MMO technology. But as I said before, I don't know of any case where there's been a survival MMO like Conan Exiles, and this game is meant to be a souped up version of Conan Exiles, so that's quite a mind-blowing concept to me, frankly. Anyway, let's read these paragraphs because they do tell us an awful lot. Survive the most dangerous planet in the universe. Build shelters against sandstorms, maintain your still suit, and master the old ways to walk even the deepest deserts. Avoid or be devoured by the colossal sandworms that dwell beneath the sands. So, build shelters. It does look like we're going to have a lot of building in this game. Whether that's going to be as detailed and as nuanced as you can get in Conan Exiles, I'm not sure. It might be that you've just got a limited number of standard dwellings that you can put together or earn in some way. But it would be nice if you could build and design your own structures, as you can in Exiles at the moment. Next up it says, explore the ever-changing face of Arrakis. Walk the ruins of long-forgotten biological testing stations, scavenge the wreckage of fallen spaceships, and wander the dusty halls of abandoned sieges. Head into unmapped sectors and be the first to discover secrets and riches before the Coriolis storms once again shift the sands and alter the landscape. And that's something I alluded to earlier, the fact that the storms will blow in and completely reshape the desert around you. Which in itself does suggest that you won't be able to build in the open desert, that you'll have to do it either underground or on one of these rocky islands. Which means that rocky islands in themselves are going to be quite valuable and something that will be fought over, I imagine. And when they talk about abandoned sieges, that of course refers to the desert bases of the Fremen, who are the indigenous inhabitants of Arrakis. Below that it says control the spice, control Arrakis, hunt for spice blows and deploy your harvester, then protect it from opportunistic raiders and rival factions. Soak the sand in blood as massive battles shift seamlessly from foot to vehicles and from ground to ornithopters in the sky. Which sounds very dramatic, I must say. I imagine the sand will be mostly soaked in my blood, to be honest with you, if you've ever seen me fighting. But as I mentioned, a lot of this game looks like it's going to be devoted to hunting down spice blows, and I imagine souping up your harvester, making it bigger and better, and keeping it maintained by scavenging parts from abandoned vehicles and experimental stations perhaps. Next it says make plans within plans. Make a name for yourself amongst the inhabitants of Arrakis. Wield intrigue and force to influence the Landrad and impact the world. Build your own faction through spice harvesting, trade, subterfuge and open conflict. So yeah, this seems to be an obvious consequence of an MMO. Various players gathering together to form the kind of clans you might normally see on a Conan Exiles server, then striving for dominance. Though unfortunately in Conan Exiles it's quite often that a single clan will take over a server and the whole thing gets a bit stale. But I think in an MMO where you've got so many players working together, it's very unlikely that you would get like a handful of clans achieving dominance. So I imagine there'd be more of a churn going on, clans rising and falling here and there. That could be quite fun. I tend to play by myself though, so I'm not sure where that leaves me. Probably not in a very good spot. Doubtless I'll get squashed like a bug, but there you go. Now this last item is very interesting indeed. It says awaken the sleeper. Tailor every aspect of your character, consume spice to conquer your senses, and acquire powerful abilities. Hone your craft to become sought out for the finest creations. Construct your fortress in the style of your choosing. The journey is yours to shape. So tailor every aspect of your character. I mean, that's just very similar to the attribute system we see in Exiles at the moment, I imagine. But then it says consume spice to conquer your senses and acquire powerful abilities. So I'm wondering if spice in this game is almost the equivalent of XP, and that you can either eat spice to boost your abilities, or you can hoard it and sell it on or trade it for other stuff. But it looks like you've got that choice. You can either use the spice yourself to develop your character, or use it as currency. It's quite a nice idea that you could go around just stuffing yourself with spice and becoming something like a superhuman as a result. And the fact that people might seek you out for fine creations is also interesting. So you might be someone who concentrates on scavenging and building stuff and then selling it on, I suppose. And it's quite gratifying that you can construct your fortress in the style of your choosing, which does imply that you'll have quite a lot of leeway in designing and building your own base. Which is good news because obviously the building element of Conan Exiles is very important to a lot of people, myself included. So it would be a real shame if Dune Awakening didn't offer at least some of the same opportunities to create bespoke builds. So all in all, Dune Awakening sounds like a very interesting project. Whether Funcom have got the know-how to pull it off, I'm not sure. I mean, compared to Dune, Age of Sorcery was a fairly modest venture, and that's been having numerous problems. So I really can't begin to imagine the challenges involved in designing a survival MMO. That does sound really like quite a hefty piece of work. So to recap, you can sign up for the beta. There is no release date as such, but if you're a PC player and you want to play Dune Spice Wars, then that will officially be launching next year. Anywho, that's all from me. Hope you found that interesting. Hope to see you again for the next video, and until I do see you again, I shall say goodbye. Okay then, cheerio.